Hi everyone, welcome back to Novel Nomad, and I'm going to be doing today my autumnal reading wrap up. Yes, fall or autumn, wherever you are in the world, it is the end of the season and we are starting winter. Now funny enough, where I'm living, we've just started to get into more of a wintry scene. So it's getting rainy, it's getting cold, and I'm getting my blankets out and my Ugg boots and I'm snuggling in to have some fantastic reading sessions. But my fall reading was really fun. I love going back and looking at all the books I read over the 3-month period and seeing how the books have progressed over time, and obviously the ones I've read when I needed a bit of a pick-me-up. Now these are not going to be all the books I read in autumn because I either lent them out from the library or they were on my Kindle, and my Kindle has a terrible glare on the screen, so there's no way you'll be able to see the pictures. But if you do want to see all the books I've read, go onto my reading challenge on Goodreads and you'll be able to see all of them on there, including the ones I've given ratings to and little comments and things like that I made along the way during reading them. So without further ado, let's get to the books. Now March seems a little bit light, but I did read quite a few books on my Kindle in March, but I also read some great buddy reads. I finished up the book called A Place Called Winter by Patrick Gale. This was the book I read for Writers Week, which was actually in March, that I keep forgetting it was in March. But yeah, I actually read this one for Writers Week. I met the author. He was fantastic. This book made me cry. It was absolutely beautiful. It has LGBTQ elements and it is just a stunning historical piece. Set in Canada too, England and Canada, but it was a very, very beautiful read. The next book I read was a buddy read with the lovely Kate Howe, and that was What Angels Fear by C.S. Harris. Now this one, I think I enjoyed a little bit more than Kate. It had a bit more action elements. It was set in Victorian England, and the main character, I think he had some supernatural tendencies. The author's saying that it is like a genetic thing, but I haven't heard of it. But yes, so this was actually a very interesting read, quite gruesome, but it was really action-packed, and I wouldn't mind checking out the second book to see where this one goes. Then Kate and I also read Crocodile on the Sandbank by Elizabeth Peters. This was absolutely fantastic. It was so hilarious. It follows the early life of Amelia Peabody, who becomes quite an heiress. Her father dies and leaves her all the money, and she decides, instead of becoming a cynical spinster and laughing at all these men's attempts to woo her and just to get to her money, she decides to do what she's always wanted to do as she's studied, is travel the world and use all the languages that she knows. So she goes through Europe and on her way to Egypt, and there she meets Evelyn, a beautiful young girl who's in need of help, and she goes down to Egypt and meets the Emerson brothers. Emerson, who's quite irascible but very charming and gets on with Amelia quite well at times, and the lovely Walter, who gets on with Evelyn quite well. So this was absolutely hilarious. It's very light on the murder. It's more of a mystery based in my opinion, but at the same time it was a really fun read. The final book we buddy read was the very first book in the Inspector Linley series called A Great Deliverance by Elizabeth George. This one was absolutely amazing. I did not guess who did it at the end until the last 2 chapters when it had the big reveal. I love the character of Linley and Havers. There's very deep characters, but then there's so much development that goes through the series and you get to see these characters grow, which was so interesting. Next, Kate and I were doing another buddy read at the time, and it was Emily of New Moon, which is by Ellen Montgomery, also known as the author of Anne of Green Gables. Kate didn't end up finishing this one with me, but I still really enjoyed it. I thought it was quite sweet. It was more realistic. I think Anne is so beautiful and glorious, and she's the ideal, and she just makes you laugh. With this one, Emily is a bit more realistic and to me I think more true. I like to associate a bit of fun and frivolity with Anne, but then I also think I can associate myself to Emily, who's quiet, she's reserved, but she's also passionate in her own way. And this copy is published by Virago, who did an absolutely gorgeous cover. Just look at that, it's stunning. Now the next 3 books I read in Genre-thon, which I did a full vlog and wrap up, which I'll link down below. You can see all my thoughts on these 3 books. I loved all of them actually. They were pretty high ratings for me. This one was probably the lowest rated, but all of them were really good reads, and I'm so happy I chose them to read during Genre-thon. The next book we picked up in book club, and that was Jojo Moyes Me Before You. When I actually organised the list, it was to coincide with the movie being released in April, but unfortunately I didn't realise that April was a release, I think, for the UK release date, and Australia and most of the rest of the world is June. So we did read this a few months early, but everyone's picking this up at the moment, and I thoroughly enjoyed this one. My initial interest in this because I read somewhere that it had elements of a Jane Eyre retelling. To an extent, I think it's more Jane Eyre if she discovered Rochester after he turned blind and he didn't recover from that. So I think this is a very interesting book. I did enjoy it. I did cry. It's hard to get away without this one crying. I didn't cry excessively at certain parts where all my other book members cried. I just cried at a random moment that I thought was really upsetting. But it's still a good read. I think it's an interesting one to view the topic of euthanasia from a lot of different angles, so it was very good for that aspect. I'm not sure if this one is classed as a book, but it is bound, and that is called The Ladies of Literature Volume 2. It is actually a illustrated book, and it has some absolutely stunning illustrations. I'll show you two pictures here. This is actually, well, these two pictures here are actually of Sabriel and Liriel, and it's all ladies in literature, in fiction books and things like that, drawn by absolutely stunning artists, and it was just wonderful to see some of my favourites and some new ones that I want to discover, just because the concept that they were created by the artist. There was a volume 1. I couldn't get my hands on it because it was a very limited release through Kickstarter, and I'm kind of bummed that I can't find that one, but I managed to find a copy of volume 2, and this is absolutely beautiful. I love having this book on my shelf. Another book I picked up in April was called What I Saw by Bette Nicholas. It follows Callie, who is quite a perfectionist. She's quite icy to other people. Many people don't understand her, and she sees that a boy is king hit one night. A guy who was there at the time, Rhett, who is a bit of a bad boy, he's a bit of the cast out as such, he's blamed for it, and she knows he did it, but certain things are holding her back from telling the truth because she knows he didn't do it, and certain things are holding her back from saying who it was in particular. So he needs to clear his name from the authorities, and he tries to convince her, and it's a little bit of a romance as well. I did enjoy this book. I did think it rushed a few elements for me, but otherwise it was an all-round really enjoyable read. Another book I actually purchased and read as soon as it came was this tiny little poetry book called Solaris by Emily O'Neill. I have read Emily's work The Pelican, and that was a recommendation from Jen Campbell, but this one was wonderful. Solaris uses a lot of horse imagery because Solaris is a star, or the name of the foal in the Pegasus constellation. But this was absolutely fantastic. I loved it. Even though it's so tiny, it still managed to get me really emotional. With my Melbourne book haul, I read Cinnamon and Gunpowder by Eli Brown, which follows the hilariously wimpy Owen Wedgwood, who is a chef, and he is taken captive by this striking figure, Mad Mabbit, who is a lady pirate. And to earn his keep, he has to cook one gourmet meal a week. It is a fabulous read. I really thoroughly enjoyed it, not just because of the political intrigue and moral questions surrounding the colonial trade at the time, but also for the gourmet. The food, the description of the food, it was absolutely stunning. It just made me feel like going out and eating like delicate soups and gorgeous parfaits and other wonderful wheat cakes, and the creation and the use of different food types at the time was also fantastic. So a really thoroughly enjoyable read. The final book I read was a buddy read with Kate Howe, and we picked up the second book in the Elizabeth Peters The Curse of the Pharaohs, another Amelia Peabody. Of course I won't tell you anything because we were in the first book, but it follows on Amelia's journey after the first book, and it's still hilarious. I loved seeing this kind of intimate view of Amelia's life, as well as her continuation of her scholarship. and her studies and all the fun that she gets up to in Egypt and archaeology. So it was a wonderful read. A bit more of a murder mystery. I did actually enjoy this one a little bit more than the first one. So I can highly recommend this one. It was a bit more of an in-house whodunit. Now, May was Mysteries Month, but of course, to break up Mysteries Month, I read quite a few other books as well, and I did surprise myself by how many books I did read, but otherwise, it was a very, very fun month. The first book I read in May was Across the Universe by Beth Revis. Now, this was part of my 2016 reading challenge, one of the big ones I did at the beginning, and this was for a futuristic romance. It is more dystopian, I find. I did find I was more interested in the dystopian elements of the book, such as the society and how it had changed and morphed and turned itself after being stuck on this ship for centuries on their way to this other planet. The elements of romance in here did have kind of an insta-lovey kind of elements to it. I didn't thoroughly enjoy the romance, but I really enjoy the dystopian elements of the story. Which is strange for me. I'm not a huge dystopian fan, but this one was quite good. The first book on my May Mysteries TBR with Kate Howe was A Payment in Blood, the second book in Elizabeth George's Inspector Linley series. We both really thoroughly enjoyed this one. I think I enjoyed this one probably on par, probably a little bit more perhaps than the first one. There was a lot of character development with Linley, and Havers, you could see, had changed from the first book. There was a little bit of a gap between the first and the second book, and that allowed for a lot of change and influence on Havers, and she became a character I greatly respected. Linley, however, he kind of fell in my respect a little bit. He became quite annoying, but you got to see a lot of his flaws, which I thought was really fantastic. The mystery itself was really good. I kept second guessing who it was all the time. I kind of had an inkling who it was in the end, and but I didn't trust myself. She never allowed me to trust myself. The really good thing is with Elizabeth George's mysteries is she'll be holding your hand down one path whilst building another behind your back, and then she'll surprise it on you. You've been going down the wrong path the whole time. So this was really, really good. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I also picked up the third book in the Elizabeth Peters Amelia Peabody series, which is called The Mummy Case. Yet again, it continues following the life of Amelia, where she is delving into more archaeological wonders of Egypt. This one, she's a little bit disappointed in what she gets to excavate as such, but lots of other exciting things happen. It wasn't as good in the mystery content as the second book, but I'm so used to just laughing and enjoying the way that Amelia is portrayed that I still thoroughly enjoy the book, even though the mystery wasn't a strong element of the story. The third book in my mystery TBR I read was actually the recommendation from Kate. It is Still Life by Louise Penny. This is the first in the Inspector Armand Gamache series. I listened to this on audiobook as well, and the guy did a wonderful job. He managed to not only get the Quebecois French accent as well as doing the English and the Quebec English accents in there. He did a really, really good job. I thoroughly enjoyed this mystery. I didn't think it was as good as the Linley as such in the mystery terms, but the character development is a very, in a way, gentle murder mystery, because Armand Gamache is a very gentle inspector. He's like this calm intelligence. I also like the surrounding characters in this one, his fellow inspector and the absolutely terrible Yvette who's in there, Yvette Nicole, who's also another investigator who's trying to get into the homicide division. She was terrible, but I hope she comes up again and she starts to get a bit more development. And probably might be an adversary, I'm guessing, of Gamache, or she learns her ways and becomes a very trusted ally. I'm not sure, but I really want to read the second one in this series now, and thank you to Kate for getting me into it so quickly. Another book that we're reading we actually decided to do over the month itself rather than a week, and because it is quite a dark mystery. It is A Sight for Sore Eyes by Ruth Rendell. I haven't quite finished this one yet. I'm still going. I have like a day. But I am thoroughly enjoying this. It's a bit darker, and Kate says it's darker than most of her other books, Rendell's other books. So I am enjoying this, but I would probably do a full discussion with Kate later on. Now I know this is the DVD case, but for book club we did read Nick Hornby's High Fidelity, and I did enjoy it to an extent. It reminded me of my brother, which he found hilarious when I told him, but I told him it was his 19-year-old self. He doesn't remind me of Rob now. But it followed the life of a 35-year-old guy, Rob. He's a bit stuck. He runs a record store. He just broke up with his girlfriend, and he realized that he really wants to get back with her, and he's going through his life to see what's wrong, what is wrong with him. And then he realizes that it's not other people finding faults in him, it's that he finds faults in himself. I did enjoy the book. It had quite a laddish British humour, and I immediately went over and borrowed my brother's copy of the movie, and I did enjoy this one as well. I think this one is a bit more hopeful, where the British one is more focused on the character and where he is at life at the moment, where this one's a bit more hopeful for the future and the romance itself. A few other books I read in May were The Lunar Chronicles. I read the first 3, and I have to admit, I really enjoyed this one. I thought this was a really good take on the Cinderella story, and I really liked the world, like a futuristic world after like post-World Wars. It's a new era. There's like cyborgs, robots, and there's now people living on the moon called Lunars. They can, in a way, control people's minds, project what they want themselves to look like on other people. It is more of a glamour as such, in a way. But yeah, so this was introducing the character of Cinder. I thought it was very good, very dramatic ending. I think it was a very, very slow start though. The second book, Scarlet, I loved because of Thorn. Oh my gosh, he made me laugh so much. He was a fantastic character. It really broke up the very harsh reality that Cinder kept looking at, and he made it really hilarious. You also had obviously the character of Scarlet and Wolf in here, looking at Little Red Riding Hood. That was a very interesting concept, how it changed that Wolf and Scarlet work together a little bit more than they are actually adversaries. And finally you have Cress. Cress is absolutely fantastic. It introduces more the character of Cress, or Crescent Moon. She is the girl who's trapped on the satellite that's orbiting Earth and does all basically jars satellites for the Lunars, and does all crazy like technical know-how in order to help the Lunars, but she is actually against the Queen, and she turns to Cinder and starts trying to help Cinder and the team, and very dramatic things happen. I thought the ending was fantastic. I'm currently in the middle of Ferris. I kind of put that one to the side because it was going to be a dark book, but I wanted to read it anyway in preparation for winter, which is on my shelf. But I am just breezing through these ones really fast. It was really fun to read these during the same time as I was reading the main mysteries. So these were a bit more of a lighter, more adventurous reads. So these were some of the books I read during autumn. I had such a fantastic time with buddy reads. I'm happy to read buddy reads all the time because it just gets me reading so many different types of books. So I hope you're all having a wonderful day and a wonderful reading, and I'll see you all soon. Bye!